This event should not be confused with the Bighorn Expedition during the Black Hills War. The Powder River Expedition of 1865, also known as the Powder River War or Powder River Invasion, was a large and far-flung military operation of the United States Army against the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho Indians in Montana Territory and Dakota Territory. Although soldiers destroyed one Arapaho village and established Fort Connor to protect travelers on the Bozeman Trail, the expedition is considered a failure because it failed to defeat the Indians and secure peace in the region. Background: the Sand Creek Massacre of Cheyenne in November 1864 intensified Indian reprisals and raids in the Platte River Valley. After the raids, the Sioux, Lakota, Cheyenne and Arapaho congregated in Powder River Country, remote from white settlements and confirmed as Indian Territory in the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Indians also perceived that the Bozeman Trail, blazed in 1863 and traversing the heart of Powder River Country, was a threat. Although roads through Indian Territory were permitted by the Fort Laramie Treaty, the Sioux, mostly Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho harassed miners and other travelers along the trail in 1864 and 1865. In July 1865, 1,000 Indian warriors in the Battle of Platte Bridge attacked a bridge across the North Platte River near Fort Caspar and succeeded in temporarily shutting down travel on both the Bozeman and the Oregon Trail. After the battle, the Indians broke up into small groups and dispersed for the summer buffalo hunt. A weakness of Indian warfare was that they lacked the resources to keep an army in the field for an extended period of time. Major General Grenville M. Dodge ordered the Powder River Expedition as a punitive campaign against the Sioux, Cheyenne and Arapaho. It was led by Brigadier General Patrick E. Connor. Dodge ordered Connor to make vigorous war upon the Indians and punish them so that they will be forced to keep the peace. The Connor expedition was one of the last Indian war campaigns carried out by U.S. volunteer soldiers. One of Connor's guides was mountain man Jim Bridger. Connor's strategy was for 3 columns of soldiers to march into the Powder River Country. The right column was composed of 1,400 Missouri soldiers, mostly mounted, led by Colonel Nelson Cole. It marched from Omaha, Nebraska and was to follow the Loup River in Nebraska westward to the Black Hills and meet up with Connor near the Powder River. The center column of 600 men was commanded by Samuel Walker of the 16th Kansas Cavalry and was to head north from Fort Laramie and traverse the country west of the Black Hills. The left column of 675 men was composed of the 6th Michigan Volunteer Cavalry Regiment under Colonel James H. Kidd, recently transferred from the Civil War battlefields of Virginia. This command included 95 Pawnee and 84 Omaha Scouts and a wagon train full of supplies with 195 civilian teamsters. General Connor would personally accompany Kidd's column and would move along the Powder River with the goal of establishing a fort near the Bozeman Trail. All 3 columns were united at the new fort. Connor's orders to his commanders were, "You will not receive overtures of peace or submission from Indians, but will attack and kill every male Indian over 12 years of age." Connor's superiors, Generals John Pope and Dodge, attempted to countermand this order, but too late as Connor's expedition had already departed and was out of contact. The expedition was troubled from the start. The number of men to be involved in the campaign was reduced from 12,000 to 2,300 because many soldiers were mustered out of the army at the end of the American Civil War. The remaining soldiers were mutinous, dissatisfied, and inefficient. Few of the men and officers had any experience fighting Indians or travel on the Great Plains. Procuring supplies was also a problem. Connor's expedition. Brigadier General Patrick E. Connor, Colonel Kidd and the 675 soldiers, Indian scouts, and teamsters left Fort Laramie, Dakota Territory, on August 2, 1865, to unite with the columns of Colonels Nelson D. Cole and Samuel Walker. Connor's column proceeded northward and established Fort Connor on the upper Powder River. The Battle of Crazy Woman's Fork. On August 13, 1865, Captain Frank J. North of the Pawnee Scouts was riding with some of his Pawnee Scouts near the Crazy Woman's Fork of the Powder River. Captain North and his scouts then spotted a small group of Cheyenne warriors and commenced to chase them. In the pursuit, North became separated from the U.S. scouts by about a mile. The retreating warriors then turned to engage North. One of the natives wounded North's horse, so the captain got behind his downed animal and used it as a barricade, from which position he then fought off his attackers. Bob White, a Pawnee scout, came upon North and joined him. Several more Pawnee scouts arrived, and the small party then shot at and wounded a few of the warriors, who then quickly fled. The Battle of Crazy Woman's Fork was the first engagement of the Powder River Expedition. The Battle of Powder River. For 2 days, Captain Frank North and his Pawnee scouts had trailed a band of Cheyenne who were heading north. The trail showed that the Cheyenne had about 40 horses and mules, along with one travois. At 2:00 a.m. on August 16, 1865, the captain and his scouts caught up with the group on Powder River, about 50 miles north of Fort Connor. The Cheyenne had made the camp for the night, and were asleep. North decided to wait until dawn to attack. In the morning, Captain Frank North's group closed on the camp. Spotting the scouts, the Cheyenne thought the approaching Indians were not the Pawnee scouts, but friendly Cheyenne, and made no hostile moves. However, the Pawnee suddenly charged in on the Cheyenne, surprising them and killing all 27 Cheyenne men and women, including Yellow Woman, who was the stepmother of George Bent. In the battle, North scouts lost 4 horses, but captured 18 horses and 17 mules, many with government brands showing they had been captured in the recent battles of Red Buttes and Platte Bridge Station, that had both occurred on July 26, 1865, near present-day Casper, Wyoming. The Battle of the Tongue River. Connor marched north from Fort Connor, and on August 28, his Pawnee scouts found an Arapaho village of about 600 people on the Tongue River near present-day Rochester, Wyoming. The next day, August 29, Connor attacked the village, whose leader was Black Bear, with 250 cavalrymen and 80 Pawnee scouts. The people in the village were primarily women, children, and old men. Most of the warriors were absent, engaged in a war with the Crow on the Big Horn River. The surprised Indians fled the village, but regrouped and counterattacked, and Connor was dissuaded from pursuing them. The soldiers destroyed the village, captured about 500 horses, and 8 women and 13 children, who were subsequently released. Connor claimed to have killed 35 Arapaho warriors, a probably exaggerated estimate, at a cost to himself of 2 killed and 5 wounded. Connor then turned around and returned to Fort Connor, harassed by the Arapaho en route. The Arapaho, who had not been overly hostile before, now joined the Sioux and Cheyenne. Sawyers Expedition. Meanwhile, an expedition commanded by Lieutenant Colonel James A. Sawyers, consisting of a train of 80 wagons, engineers, supplies, and escorting soldiers of Companies C and D of the 5th U.S. Volunteer Infantry, was en route to meet Connor on the Powder River with the plan to continue on to Montana. Sawyers' group was to construct a new road for the use of emigrants to the Montana gold fields. The Battle of Bone Pile Creek on August 13, 1865, the soldiers, civilians, and wagon train of the Sawyers Expedition were moving west. The soldiers accompanying the train included a battalion of the 5th U.S. Volunteer Infantry, Companies C and D, under the command of Captain George Williford. In the evening near Pumpkin Butte, Cheyenne and Sioux Native American warriors attacked the train, killing Nathaniel Hedges, a 19-year-old civilian employee. Later in the evening of the 13th, the wagons were corralled near Bone Pile Creek, and Hedges was buried at the center of the corral. The next morning, the warriors returned and attacked again. The warriors again attacked the corralled wagons on the 15th, but they could not overtake the wagon train. Chief Red Cloud of the Sioux and Dull Knife of the Cheyenne, accompanied by George Bent and Charles Bent of the Cheyenne, negotiated with Lieutenant Colonel Sawyers for a safe passage of the wagon train in exchange for one wagon's load of supplies. Soldiers of the 5th U.S. Volunteer Infantry reported that at this time that the Cheyenne warrior George Bent was dressed in a United States military uniform. Sawyers agreed to give the supplies, which included a wagon full of sugar, bacon, coffee, flour, and tobacco. When the wagons began moving again, the natives attacked again, killing Privates Anthony Nelson and John Rawls. The soldiers fired back, killing 2 warriors, and the Native Americans quickly withdrew from the corralled wagons. After burying Private Nelson beside Nathaniel Hedges, and being unable to locate the body of Private Rawls, the Sawyers Expedition continued on. Sawyers' fight on September 1, 1865. Our Arapaho warriors, infuriated by the destruction of the village on the Tongue River, attacked Sawyers' wagon train, killing 3 men. 2 of the Arapaho warriors were killed. The wagon train was held under virtual siege for 2 weeks when it was finally rescued by Connor's forces. Cole's and Walker's expeditions. The 2 columns set out. Colonel Nelson D. Cole left Omaha, Nebraska on July 1, 1865, with over 1,400 Missourians and 140 wagon loads of supplies. His column followed the Loup River upstream and then marched across country to Bear Butte in the Black Hills, arriving there on August 13, 1865. Cole's command, during the 560 miles of traveling, suffered from thirst, diminishing supplies, and near mutinies. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Walker and his 600 Kansas cavalrymen left Fort Laramie, Dakota Territory on August 6, 1865, and met up with Cole's expedition on August 19, 1865, near the Black Hills. He had likewise suffered from shortages of water, and had lost several of his soldiers of the 16th Regiment Kansas Volunteer Cavalry from bad water. The 2 columns marched separately, but remained in contact as they moved west to Powder River in Montana Territory. By this time, some of the men were barefooted and many of the horses and mules were growing weak. The Battle of Alkali Creek. On the morning of September 1, 1865, the over 1,400 United States soldiers and civilians of Colonel Nelson D. Cole's column of the Powder River Expedition were encamped on Alkali Creek, a tributary of the Powder River. This was in Montana Territory, in present-day Custer County, Montana. In the early morning, over 300 Hunkpapa, Sansac, and Mini-Conchie Lakota Sioux warriors attacked the camp's horse herd. The first of the soldiers to respond were 7 men of Battery K in the 2nd Missouri Light Artillery Regiment. Shortly after leaving the camp, warriors ambushed this party, and in the following battle, 5 of these 7 soldiers became casualties, with 2 killed, 1 mortally wounded, and 2 wounded. Later that night, 2 unknown U. soldiers in a hunting party were killed. The known Sioux casualties during the Battle of Alkali Creek are 4 unknown warriors killed and 4 unknown warriors wounded. March on Powder River. On the next day, Saturday, September 2, 1865, there were at least 3 small skirmishes with warriors. In the first, at least 1 warrior was killed in the fight. In the second, no casualties were reported. In the third, later in the day, 2 soldiers were killed while returning to camp after a hunting trip. In desperate need of supplies, Colonel Colin Walker decided to follow Powder River north to search for Brigadier General Patrick E. Connor's column and his wagon train. The expeditions continued north to the mouth of Mizpah Creek in Custer County, Montana. There, the 2 colonels decided to turn back around and retrace the steps south up the Powder River to search for Connor's left column. The Indians attacked again on September 4 and 5, 1865, in present-day Custer County, Montana. They continued to harass Cole and Walker as the soldiers moved south up Powder River. The Battle of Dry Creek on September 8, 1865, the over 2,000 United States soldiers and civilians of Colonel Nelson D. Cole's and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Walker's columns of the Powder River Expedition were marching south up Powder River in Montana Territory. Unbeknownst to them, a village of over 2,500 Cheyenne, Sioux, and Arapaho, including the Cheyenne chief Romanos, were camped less than 10 miles away. When discovering this, the Cheyenne, Sioux, and Arapaho warriors, not wanting the soldiers to attack the village, attacked the soldiers first. The soldiers' lead guard was marching about 1/4 of a mile ahead of the column. This command was it first. Out of the 25 men of the lead guard, 2 men became casualties. After seeing this first confrontation, Lieutenant Colonel Walker sent a courier back to inform Colonel Cole of the attack. At the time, Cole was overseeing the crossing of his wagon train to the east bank of the Powder River. Cole ordered the train out of the timber and corralled, and the 12th Missouri Cavalry to skirmish through the woods along the river bank, and to drive out a body of Indians in the woods. The soldiers pushed the warriors off the battlefield. Near the end of the engagement, another private was wounded. At least 1 Native American was killed in the engagement. A snowstorm during the night of September 8 to 9, 1865 caused further problems for the soldiers, most of whom were now on foot, in rags, and reduced to eating raw horse meat. The Battle of the Little Powder River. On the morning of September 10, 1865, the over 2,000 United States soldiers and civilians of Colonel Nelson D. Cole's and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Walker's columns of the Powder River Expedition were encamped near the confluence of the Little Powder River and the Powder River in Montana Territory. The camp was packed and almost all of the soldiers had moved out when Native American warriors appeared. A German immigrant, First Lieutenant Charles H. Springer, of Company B, in the 12th Missouri Cavalry, wrote in his diary the day that as the last of the soldiers left the camp of the previous night, the Native American warriors came charging down from the hills, but a volley from Comp. A and C sent them back amongst the hills. Comp. A and C that Springer referred to were Companies A and C of the 12th Missouri Volunteer Cavalry Regiment. There were volleys and some sporadic firing. The 12th Missouri Volunteer Cavalry Regiment that Springer was a member of was commanded by Colonel Oliver Wells. This was what Wells reported on the engagement. On the 10th, the Indians nearly enveloped the camp as the command moved out, and followed on our flank and rear until about noon. But little was accomplished, however, and much useless firing was done. The Indians had this day about 4 or 5 good muskets. One of our men was slightly wounded, and 3 Indians were shot, but carried off by their comrades. The Coal Expedition's chief engineering officer, Major Lyman G. Bennett, wrote in his diary on September 10, 1865, that, "We commenced the march and coming to the river, found it swollen so that it could not be easily crossed. Indians also menaced the head of the column, and the heads could be seen in the hundreds protruding from the tops of the hills. We finally found another ford above and crossed the command, only losing one wagon, though many men and horses were thrown into the water. A few Indians hovered around our advance for a few miles and then hauled off, and we saw no more of them." There is very little known about the Native Americans' side during the battle, and most information about it comes from the reports and diaries of soldiers that were at the scene. It was not a large engagement, and consisted mostly of skirmishing. The Little Powder River battlefield is located on private land, on Powderville West Road, along the Powder River, in Powder River County, Montana. It is located less than 3 miles northeast of the present-day town of Broadless, Montana. The expedition's end. On September 11th, there was more light skirmishing. On September 13th, 2 scouts from Brigadier General Connor's column found Walker's and Cole's columns on Powder River and informed them of the newly established Fort Connor on Powder River east of Casey, Wyoming. Cole, Walker, and the soldiers arrived there on September 20, 1865. Connor deemed the soldiers unfit for further service and sent them back to Fort Laramie, where most of them were mustered out of the army. Casualties. Colonel Cole reported that the Eastern Column sustained 12 men killed and 2 men missing. Lieutenant Colonel Walker reported that the Center Column suffered 1 man killed and 4 men wounded. Cole claimed that his soldiers had killed 200 Indians. By contrast, Walker said, "I cannot say as we killed 1. Indian casualties were likely light." Aftermath. Connor finally united all the components of his expedition on September 24, 1865, at Fort Connor. However, orders transferring him to Utah were awaiting him when he arrived there. The 16th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry remained to staff Fort Connor, and all other troops withdrew to Fort Laramie, most to be mustered out of the army. Although achieving some successes, the expedition failed to defeat decisively or intimidate the Indians. The Cheyenne warrior, George Bend, a participant in the Battle of Dry Creek on September 8, 1865, stated that the Lakota would have annihilated Cole's and Walker's columns had they possessed more good firearms. Indian resistance to travelers on the Bozeman Trail became more determined than ever. There will be no more travel on that road until the government takes care of the Indians, a correspondent wrote. The most important consequence of the expedition was to persuade the United States government that another effort to build and protect a wagon road from Fort Laramie to the gold fields in Montana was desirable. That conviction would lead to a renewed invasion of the Powder River country a year later, and Red Cloud's War, in which the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho would emerge victorious. Officers accompanying the Powder River Expedition. Headquarters: Brigadier General Patrick E. Connor, commanding. Captain C.J. Laurent, Assistant Adjutant General. Headquarters: Captain Samuel Robbins, Chief Engineer, 1st Colorado Cavalry. Captain Henry E. Palmer, Quartermaster, 11th Kansas Cavalry. Captain William H. Tubbs, Acting Commissary of Subsistence. Headquarters: 2nd Lieutenant Oscar Jewett, Aide-de-Camp to Connor. Headquarters. Right Column Colonel Nelson D. Cole. Headquarters: 2nd Missouri Artillery. Colonel Oliver Wells. Headquarters: 12th Missouri Cavalry. Major Lyman G. Bennett, Chief Engineer, 4th Arkansas Cavalry. Major Clemens Landgraber, Headquarters, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Surgeon George Washington Corey, Headquarters, 12th Missouri Cavalry. Captain McMurray, Headquarters, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain Samuel Flagg, Battery B, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain Jefferson Miller, Battery E, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain William C. F. Montgomery, Battery H, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain Edward S. Rowland, Battery K, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain Charles H. Thurber, Battery L, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Captain Napoleon Boardman, Battery M, 2nd Missouri Artillery. First Lieutenant John H. Kendall, Battery L, 2nd Missouri Artillery. First Lieutenant Charles H. Springer, Company B, 12th Missouri Cavalry. First Lieutenant William Rinner, Battery C, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Second Lieutenant Frederick J. Amsden, U.S. Signal Corps, Department of the Missouri. Second Lieutenant George R. Thorne, Acting Assistant Quartermaster. Second Lieutenant William T. Shaver, Headquarters, 12th Missouri Cavalry. Second Lieutenant Hiram L. Kelly, Battery A, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Second Lieutenant Philip Smiley, Battery H, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Second Lieutenant Abram S. Hoagland, Battery K, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Second Lieutenant James A. Theron, Battery K, 2nd Missouri Artillery. Central Column Brevet Brigadier General Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Walker, Headquarters, 16th Kansas Cavalry. Major Clarkson Reynolds, Headquarters, 16th Kansas Cavalry. Surgeon James P. Erickson, Headquarters, 16th Kansas Cavalry. Captain Oscar F. Dunlap, Company H, 15th Kansas Cavalry. First Lieutenant R. M. Fisk, Company H, 15th Kansas Cavalry. First Lieutenant James L. Walker, Company D, 16th Kansas Cavalry. First Lieutenant Wesley T. Smith, Company H, 16th Kansas Cavalry. Second Lieutenant Charles Balance, Company F, 16th Kansas Cavalry. Second Lieutenant Edward Gill, Company H, 15th Kansas Cavalry. Second Lieutenant Francis E. Smith, Company H, 15th Kansas Cavalry. Left Column Colonel James H. Kidd, Headquarters, 6th Michigan Cavalry. Captain Frank North, Company A, Pawnee Indian Scouts. Captain Albert Brown, Company M, 2nd California Cavalry. Captain Osmer F. Cole, Company L, 6th Michigan Cavalry. Captain George Conrad, Company L, 2nd California Cavalry. Captain Jacob L. Humphreyville, Company K, 11th Ohio Cavalry. Captain Levi G. Marshall, Company E, 11th Ohio Cavalry. Captain Edwin R. Nash, Company A, Omaha, Winnebago Indian Scouts. Captain N.J. O'Brien, Company F, 7th Iowa Cavalry. First Lieutenant John S. Brewer, Company F, 7th Iowa Cavalry. First Lieutenant Michael Evans, Company A, Omaha, Winnebago Indian Scouts. First Lieutenant Charles A. Small, Company A, Pawnee Indian Scouts. Second Lieutenant Joseph Willard Brown, U.S. Signal Corps, Department of the Missouri. Second Lieutenant Gavin Mitchell, Company A, Omaha, Winnebago Indian Scouts. Second Lieutenant James Murray, Company A, Omaha, Winnebago Indian Scouts. Second Lieutenant Alonzo V. Richards, U.S. Signal Corps, Department of the Missouri. Second Lieutenant Eugene F. Ware, Company F, 7th Iowa Cavalry. Order of Battle.